Hi, I'm Natalie. 6 months ago, I opened my savings account to make a down payment on my dream house. The account where I'd stored every penny from the business Aiden and I built before his accident. It showed a balance of $12. 43. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My father was in the middle of a phone call when I walked into his office. "Oh, we invested that in Vanessa's company," he said without looking up. "Great opportunity. You'll thank us later." They emptied $387,000 from my account with the wave of a hand, like it was spare change from a coffee run. No discussion, no documentation, just a company prospectus left on my kitchen counter a week later. But what they couldn't have anticipated was what I'd do next. Before I tell you how this ends, let me ask you something. Have you ever had your trust completely shattered by the people who should have protected you the most? The ones who were supposed to be in your corner? Monday afternoons in Portland carried a particular weight in February. Rain tapped steadily against my apartment windows, creating a rhythm that normally would have been soothing. I was sitting at my kitchen island, staring at my laptop screen, refreshing my banking app for the 5th time, as if that would somehow change the numbers staring back at me. 12 of 43. That's what remained of nearly $400,000. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to steady my breathing. It had been 4 years since the accident. 4 years since Aiden and I had stood in that parking lot outside our first real office space, champagne bottle in hand, celebrating a contract that would finally put Westline Solutions on the map. 4 years since that rainy highway took him away, leaving me with our company and a promise I made as he was loaded into the ambulance, that I'd make sure his work meant something. The company had flourished for 3 years after. Even without Aiden's brilliant development skills, I'd managed to grow our client list, expand our services, and finally, last summer, sell to a larger firm with the understanding that Aiden's name would remain on the core technology. The payout wasn't astronomical by tech standards, but it was life-changing for me. Enough to buy that craftsman house in Selwood we'd always talked about, with a room I could dedicate as a tribute to Aiden's work, a place where I could finally feel settled again. I closed my laptop and grabbed my rain jacket. The drive to my parents' house in the West Hills took 20 minutes, each minute filling my chest with a new kind of tension I'd never felt around family before. Their house sat perched on a hillside, all glass and cedar, a monument to my father's 30 years in investment banking. I'd grown up watching him make money for other people while my mother orchestrated charity galas that conveniently coincided with my father's biggest client meetings. My sister Vanessa's blue Tesla was in the driveway, of course. She never missed Sunday dinner, even though she now lived in Seattle running her tech startup. PrimeSync was her 3rd business venture in 5 years. The first 2 had quietly dissolved with sleek press releases about market readjustments and pivoting toward new opportunities. I hadn't even knocked when the door swung open. My mother, Eleanor, stood with perfect posture, her silver-streaked dark hair twisted into her signature low bun. "Natalie, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you until Sunday." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she glanced at her watch. "Your father is on an important call." "This won't take long," I said, stepping past her into the foyer. "I just have a quick question about my savings account." Her expression didn't change, but I noticed her hand tighten slightly on the door handle before she closed it. "Let's go to the kitchen. I just made a fresh pot of coffee." The kitchen was exactly as it had always been. Immaculate white marble countertops, copper pots hanging above the island, not a single item out of place. My father, Richard, was sitting at the breakfast nook, one hand holding his phone to his ear, the other typing rapidly on his laptop. He glanced up, gave a quick nod of acknowledgement, then returned to his conversation. I sat across from my mother at the island as she poured coffee into a mug with precision that bordered on clinical. Mom, do you know what happened to the money in my savings account? The one from the Westline sale? She stirred a spoonful of sugar into her coffee, the spoon making a soft clink against the ceramic. Richard, she called out, Natalie has a question about her account. My father held up one finger, signaling us to wait, and continued his call. I could feel the heat rising to my face. It's missing, I said, turning back to her. All of it. Almost $400,000. Gone. She took a slow sip of her coffee. It's not missing, darling. It's been invested. Invested? My voice sounded foreign to me, too controlled, too quiet. I didn't authorize any investments. Your father handled it. Quite a good opportunity, actually. Vanessa's company is in the final round of Series B funding. The return could be substantial. The room seemed to tilt slightly. You put my money into Vanessa's startup? Without asking me? My father ended his call and joined us at the island. Not just your money, Natalie. We've put in a considerable amount ourselves. The projections are excellent. This is the kind of opportunity I'd normally only offer to my top clients. He spoke with such certainty, as if he'd just given me a gift. I was going to use that money for a house. I told you both about this, multiple times. My father waved his hand dismissively. Houses are always there. Opportunities like this come once in a lifetime. The potential return could buy you 3 houses. Or 0, I said, like Vanessa's last 2 companies. His expression hardened. That's unfair. Those ventures provided valuable market insights. This one is different. The technology is groundbreaking. It wasn't your decision to make. That was my money. Money I earned with Aiden, building something real that actually helped people. My mother's posture stiffened. Natalie, you're being dramatic. This is what families do. We support each other's ventures. Besides, it's done now. The contracts have been signed. What contracts? I asked, my voice rising despite my best efforts. I never signed anything. An uncomfortable silence filled the kitchen. My father cleared his throat. Well, technically, we used the family trust mechanism. Your grandfather set it up so that the senior trustees could make investment decisions for junior members in certain circumstances. I'm 32 years old. I'm not a child who needs investment guidance. Age is irrelevant to the trust. Structure, he replied, his tone taking on the same voice he used when explaining financial concepts to his assistants. And frankly, Natalie, you've been somewhat adrift since Aiden's passing. We thought this would be a good way to bring you back into the family's business interests. The casual mention of Aiden, used as a justification for their actions, made something inside me go very cold and very still. Where's Vanessa? I asked quietly. She's in the sunroom taking a call with potential investors, my mother replied. Please don't interrupt her. These negotiations are at a critical stage. I stood up slowly. I want the paperwork, all of it. The trust documents, the investment agreement, everything. My father looked at me like I was a client who had just asked a particularly tiresome question. I'll have my assistant send over copies. But Natalie, this is a good thing. In 6 months, you'll be thanking us. I didn't respond. I simply walked out of the kitchen, past the sunroom where I could hear Vanessa's animated voice painting verbal pictures of market disruption and scalable solutions, and out the front door into the rain. By the time I reached my car, I was soaked, but I didn't feel it. All I could feel was a strange, hollow sensation where my trust in my family had once been. That night, I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor, surrounded by old photos. Aiden and me at our college graduation, the day we got our first business license, the camping trip where we'd sketched our company logo on the back of a trail map. His grin was the same in every photo, wide and genuine, with a slight crook on the left side. We're building something that matters, he'd always say. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I'd been avoiding. Marcus, it's Natalie. I need your help. Marcus Diaz had been Aiden's roommate in college before becoming our company's first official employee. After the sale, he'd moved to a larger firm in Seattle, ironically, not far from where Vanessa had set up PrimeSync's headquarters. Nat? Everything okay? It's almost midnight. I told him everything. The empty account, the family trust, Vanessa's company. His whistle cut through the phone. Jesus, Nat. That's not even legal, is it? According to my father, it is. Something about the trust my grandfather set up. What about the sale contract from Westline? Wasn't that money supposed to be personally allocated to you, outside of any family trust? I hadn't even thought of that angle. I need to check the paperwork. Do that. And Nat, PrimeSync is... Well, there are rumors up here. Not good. Ones. My stomach tightened. What kind of rumors? The kind that suggest their technology isn't as groundbreaking as they claim. Some people are saying it's mostly smoke and mirrors to attract investors. I didn't mention it before because, well, she's your sister. Do you have any contacts there? Anyone who could give me a real inside look? He was quiet for a moment. Let me make some calls. But Nat, be careful. This isn't just about money anymore. After we hung up, I pulled out my laptop and began searching for everything I could find on PrimeSync. Their website was slick, filled with buzzwords and promises of revolutionary AI-driven supply chain solutions. Their press section featured Vanessa in glossy photos at tech conferences, always perfectly poised in her signature cobalt blue blazers, always quoted saying things like, "The future isn't about working harder, it's about working smarter with the right technological partnership." I dug deeper, looking at financial news, industry blogs, LinkedIn profiles of employees. Around 2 a.m., I found something interesting, a series of employee reviews on a tech industry forum. Most were vague complaints about management, but one stood out. The demo that impressed investors was mostly simulated. The actual product is at least 18 months from delivering what was promised. When developers point this out, they're sidelined. I created a new document on my laptop and titled it simply Evidence. Then I began to build a timeline. The next morning, I called in sick to my consulting job and drove to the bank where I'd opened my account after the Westline sale. The branch manager remembered me. It wasn't every day someone deposited a check that size in their branch. "Ms. Russo, I understand your concern," he said after I explained the situation. "But the transfer was authorized using proper credentials and verification. Can you at least tell me when it happened and who authorized it?" He tapped at his keyboard. The transfer was initiated on January 12th by Richard Russo, who is listed as a co-trustee on your account. January 12th. 3 days after I'd mentioned at Sunday dinner that I was meeting with a realtor about the house in Selwood. I never added my father as a co-trustee on this account. This was my personal account from the sale of my company. The manager frowned, tapping more keys. According to our records, the account was initially opened under the Russo Family Trust, with you and your father as co-trustees. All proper documentation was filed. I felt sick. I need copies of everything, the account opening forms, the transfer authorization, all of it. An hour later, I sat in my car staring at the paperwork. My signature was on the account opening forms, but not where I remembered signing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And the trust designation was clearly marked, though I had no memory of ever agreeing to that. Had I been so grief-stricken after selling Aiden's company that I hadn't read the paperwork properly? Or was something more disturbing happening? I called Marcus again. "Any news from your Seattle contacts?" I asked without preamble. "Better than that. I'm having coffee in an hour with someone who just left PrimeSync's development team. Want me to put you on speaker during the conversation?" "That would be perfect. And Marcus, I think my father may have altered my banking paperwork. He was silent for a moment. Nat, if that's true, it's not just unethical, it's criminal. I know, but I need more proof. While waiting for Marcus's call, I drove to the storage unit where I'd kept most of Aiden's things and our business records. The smell hit me as I rolled up the metal door, paper, cardboard, and the faint trace of Aiden's sandalwood cologne from the box of his clothes I couldn't bear to donate. I found what I was looking for in the third file box, a copy of the sale. Agreement for Westline Solutions. I scanned through the legal language until I found the payment section. Payment shall be made directly to Natalie Russo, as sole surviving partner, into an account of her designation, separate from any family or outside interests. I took a photo of the paragraph with my phone just as it rang. Nat, I'm with Danielle Parker. She was a senior developer at Prime Sync until 2 weeks ago. I'm putting you on speaker. Hi, Natalie, a woman's voice came through. Marcus explained your situation. I'm sorry about your investment. Thanks for talking to me. Can you tell me what's really going on at Prime Sync? Danielle's sigh was audible. The short version? The technology doesn't work. Not the way they're selling it anyway. The AI component that's supposed to be their big innovation is basically a facade. During investor demos, what they're seeing is a simulated version running on pre-programmed scenarios, not actual real-time analysis. My heart sank. And the investors don't know this? Some might suspect, but Vanessa is persuasive. She has this way of making people believe that any current limitations are just temporary stepping stones. The problem is, we were hitting the same stepping stones for months with no progress. Do you have any documentation of this? Emails? Internal memos? Anything? I have some screenshots of internal chat discussions where we debated telling investors the truth. And I kept my performance review where I was criticized for negative messaging when I suggested we be more transparent about development timelines. Would you be willing to share those with me? There was a pause. What exactly are you planning to do? I don't know yet. But that company just took my entire savings, money that I earned with my late business partner, money that meant something more than just dollars. Another pause. I'll send what I have to Marcus. Just be careful. Your sister has some powerful connections in the industry. After the call ended, I sat in the storage unit surrounded by the remnants of the honest business Aiden and I had built. A business that had actually delivered what it promised. I picked up a framed photo of us standing in front of our first tiny office, arms around each other's shoulders, exhausted but proud. I won't let them erase what we built, I whispered to his smiling face. That night, I created a secure folder on my laptop and added everything I'd collected so far. The bank documents, the sale agreement, the screenshots Danielle had sent, and my own timeline of events. I titled the folder, Prime Sync Reality. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of research and evidence gathering. I skipped Sunday dinner with my family, claiming a heavy workload. In reality, I was meeting with a lawyer Marcus had recommended, someone specializing in both financial, fraud, and intellectual property. Ms. Russo, based on what you've shown me, you have several potential claims, the lawyer, Ms. Chen, said during our second meeting. The transfer of your funds appears highly questionable, possibly fraudulent if your signature was used inappropriately. And if Prime Sync is misrepresenting their technology to investors, that's securities fraud. What's my best move here? I asked. That depends on your goal. Do you want your money back? Do you want to expose the company? Or is this about your family relationships? I considered her question carefully. All of the above, I guess. But mostly, I want to protect what Aiden and I built. I don't want our hard work to fund a fraud. Ms. Chen nodded. Then we need to be strategic. Direct confrontation might cause them to cover their tracks. We need to gather more evidence while positioning you to act when the moment is right. What kind of evidence? Investor presentations, technical documentation, financial projections versus actual development milestones. And we need to understand exactly how your money was used. I left her office with a plan. It wasn't the emotional confrontation part of me wanted, but something colder and more calculated. Something that would honor the methodical way Aiden and I had built our business, step by step, with integrity at the center. 3 days later, my father called. "Natalie, we missed you at dinner on Sunday. Your mother is concerned." "I've been busy," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Work has been demanding." "Well, I wanted to update you on the investment. Prime Sync is finalizing their Series B round next month. The valuation is even higher than projected. You should attend the investor meeting in Seattle. See what your money is building." The casual way he said "your money" made my jaw clench, but I forced myself to relax. "That sounds interesting. When is it?" "March 15th. I'll have Vanessa's assistant send you the details." "Great. I'd love to see what they're working on." After we hung up, I called Marcus. "I need a favor. A big one." On March 15th, I drove to Seattle for the investor meeting. The Prime Sync offices occupied the top floor of a gleaming tower downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. The reception area featured a large digital display showing a stylized visualization of data flows. Beautiful, impressive, and as I now knew, largely fictional. Vanessa spotted me as soon as I entered the conference room. She was deep in conversation with 2 men in expensive suits, but excused herself immediately. "Natalie, I didn't know you were coming." Her smile was genuine, which somehow made everything worse. Her cobalt blazer matched the company's branding perfectly. "Dad suggested I see what my investment is building," I said, returning her smile with equal sincerity. A flicker of something, discomfort, guilt, crossed her face before she recovered. "Of course, your family. Though usually we don't have non-accredited investors at these meetings." "I think $387,000 buys me a seat at the table, don't you?" She laughed, a practiced sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Absolutely. Come on, I'll introduce you to the team." The meeting was a masterclass in presentation. Vanessa commanded the room with practiced confidence, walking investors through slick demos and ambitious projections. The technology looked impressive on the large screens. Supply chains optimizing in real time, AI making complex decisions, costs dropping dramatically. I watched the investors' faces as they absorbed the promises. Most looked captivated. A few had the studied neutrality of experienced skeptics. None looked like they knew what I knew. During the networking reception afterward, I approached one of the developers I recognized from an employee photo Marcus had shown me. "The neural network adaptation looks impressive," I said, referencing a term I'd heard Vanessa use during the presentation. "How long did that take to implement?" The young man glanced nervously toward where Vanessa was talking with investors. "It's been an ongoing process, very complex integration points." "I imagine. My late partner and I built machine learning systems for inventory management. The gap between demo and deployment was always our biggest challenge." His posture relaxed. "Slightly. Exactly. It's difficult to make people understand that what works in a controlled environment doesn't always scale in real-world applications. So where are you really in the development cycle? The demo looks almost market-ready." He hesitated. "We're making progress. The core algorithm is solid, but there are still significant challenges with the predictive elements." "Meaning?" "The demo we saw today isn't fully functional?" His eyes darted around again. "I should get back to my team. Nice meeting you." As he walked away, I felt a hand on my arm. Vanessa. "Making friends with the coding team?" she asked lightly, but her grip was tight. "Just professional curiosity. It reminds me of what Aiden and I were building, but on a much larger scale." Her expression softened at the mention of Aiden. He would have loved this. All these brilliant minds working together on something revolutionary. The sincerity in her voice was like a knife. She actually believed that. Would he? Aiden was pretty big on delivering what you promise. Her smile faltered for just a second. We all are. That's the prime sync difference. I excused myself shortly after, claiming a long drive back to Portland. As I left the building, I sent a text to Marcus. Did you get everything? His reply came immediately. All set. Meeting you at the hotel in 20. In a hotel room 10 blocks from the Prime Sync office, Marcus handed me a small USB drive. Everything from their internal development servers, emails, progress reports, test results. Danielle's access still worked, and she set it up so I could clone the directories without leaving traces. Is it as bad as we thought? He nodded, grimly. Worse. They're at least 2 years away from delivering what they're selling, if ever. And there's something else. They've been using a lot of code that looks suspiciously like some of Westline's proprietary algorithms, the stuff you and Aiden developed for inventory prediction. My blood ran cold. They stole our code? Not directly. They've modified it, built around it. But the core approach is unmistakable. I'd bet anything Vanessa got access to your development archives through your parents at some point. I thought of all the times I'd shared Westline's progress, during family dinners, how proud I'd been of what Aiden and I were building, how my father had occasionally asked technical questions I'd thought were just him showing interest. So my money is funding a company that's not only misrepresenting its capabilities but also built on technology Aiden and I created? Marcus didn't need to answer. The evidence was right there on the drive. Back in Portland, I met again with Ms. Chen, showing her everything Marcus had recovered. This is substantial, she said, scrolling through the files. The intellectual property issue alone would give you significant leverage. Combined with the questionable transfer of your funds and the misrepresentations to investors, you have multiple angles to pursue. I don't want to just file a lawsuit. That could take years, and by then, there might be nothing left to recover. What are you thinking? I took a deep breath. I think Prime Sync is going to face a cash crisis soon. Their burn rate is unsustainable. And if investors start asking the right questions, the next funding round could fall through. Ms. Chen raised an eyebrow. You want to accelerate that crisis? No, I want to be positioned to step in when it happens. I want to buy the company. She leaned back in her chair. With what capital? Your funds are already tied up in the company. Not all of them. I pulled out a statement showing a separate account. Smaller, but still substantial. This is what I set aside specifically for a memorial fund in Aiden's name. I never told my family about it. And I have some assets I can liquidate. Even so, it won't be enough to buy out a company at the valuation they're claiming. Not at their claimed valuation, no, but at their real valuation once investors understand what they're actually buying. Maybe. 2 weeks later, an anonymous report appeared in a respected tech industry publication, detailing concerns about Prime Sync's technology and questioning whether their demos reflected actual capabilities. The article didn't mention me or my connection to the company, but it asked exactly the right questions to make potential investors nervous. 3 days after that, my father called in a panic. Natalie, have you seen this hit piece on Prime Sync? It's market manipulation, pure and simple. Some competitor trying to tank their valuation before the funding round. I saw it, I said calmly. Do you think there's any truth to it? Of course not. Vanessa is devastated. Years of work, and now they might lose their lead investors because of unfounded accusations. That's terrible. How's the company responding? He sighed heavily. They're scrambling to arrange private demonstrations for the major investors, but it's a logistical nightmare. And without this round of funding, they won't make payroll next month. I let the silence stretch for a moment. That sounds serious. It is. Your mother and I are considering putting more of our own assets in to bridge the gap, but frankly, we're already heavily exposed. Maybe I can help, I said. I could come up to Seattle, see what's really going on. Would you? Vanessa could? Use the moral support if nothing else, and maybe a fresh perspective. I agreed to drive up the next day. After we hung up, I called Ms. Chen. It's happening. Faster than we expected. Are you ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. The Prime Sync offices had a different energy when I arrived the next day. Gone was the confident buzz of a rising star. Instead, small groups of employees huddled in corners, speaking in low, concerned voices. Vanessa met me in the reception area, the circles under her eyes poorly concealed by makeup. Thanks for coming, she said, giving me a quick hug. It's been a nightmare week. Walk me through what happened, I said as she led me to her office. For the next hour, she explained the crisis, how the article had spooked investors, how they were demanding proof the technology worked as advertised, how the development team was working around the clock to prepare demonstrations that would satisfy their concerns. I listened without interrupting, noting how she never once acknowledged the accuracy of the article's claims. In her mind, this was purely an PR problem, not a fundamental issue with the product or their approach. The timing couldn't be worse, she concluded. We're 3 weeks away from a major breakthrough with the neural network processing. But without this funding round, we won't get there. How bad is the cash position? She ran a hand through her hair, a rare gesture of genuine stress I hadn't seen since we were teenagers. Bad. 6 weeks of runway, maximum. We've already implemented a hiring freeze and cut all non-essential expenses. And Mom and Dad, they're tapped out? A flash of guilt crossed her face. They've been incredibly supportive, but they've already put in everything they can responsibly invest. I nodded, taking it all in. Let me see the actual development environment, not a demo, the real working system. She hesitated. It's not very impressive in its current state. A lot of the user interface elements aren't polished yet. I don't care about polish. I want to understand what's real and what's still in development. Reluctantly, she took me to the development floor. The lead engineer walked us through their actual progress, which, as I already knew, was substantially behind what had been presented to investors. The core technology had potential, but it was nowhere near delivering on the promises that had been made. After the tour, I asked to speak with Vanessa privately. Back in her office, I closed the door. Van, I need you. To be honest with me, is any of this based on Westline's technology? On what Aiden and I built? Her face paled. What are you talking about? I've had experts look at your code. There are striking similarities to our inventory prediction algorithms, the ones Aiden spent 2 years perfecting. She looked away. We drew inspiration from multiple sources in the industry. That's how innovation works. That's not how intellectual property works, though, and it's not how family works either. She stood up, pacing behind her desk. What do you want me to say, Nat? That we're struggling? That we borrowed ideas from a successful model? Every startup does that. Not with proprietary code they accessed through family connections, and not while using their sister's money without permission. Dad said you agreed to the investment. He said you were excited about it. I laughed, a hollow sound. And you believed that? Without ever calling to ask me directly? Her silence was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm and measured. I'm preparing an offer to purchase controlling interest in Prime Sync at a valuation reflecting its actual development status and financial position. Her eyes widened. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. The company has 3 options. Accept my offer, face potential legal action for both the misappropriation of my funds and the intellectual property issues, or continue the current course and likely run out of cash within 2 months. This is because of the money, isn't it? I had no idea Dad didn't talk to you first. I would never have. This isn't just about the money, Vanessa. It's about respect. It's about honesty. It's about building something real, not just a house of cards to impress investors. Aiden taught me that. She flinched at his name. So what happens if we accept your offer? You shut everything down? Fire everyone? Is that your revenge? I shook my head. No. I'd restructure, refocus on developing the technology properly, without the shortcuts and false promises. I'd honor the work that's been done while being honest about what's still needed. And me? What happens to me in this scenario? That depends on you. If you can be honest, with yourself, with the team, with me, there could still be a place for you. You're brilliant at some aspects of this business, Vanessa. Just not the parts you've been pretending are already solved. I left her office without waiting for a response. In the elevator down to the lobby, I texted Ms. Chen, "Offer ready, let's move." 2 weeks of intense negotiations followed. My parents were furious at first, then desperate, then finally resigned as they realized the extent of PrimeSync's actual position. The company's board, faced with the evidence I provided and the rapidly deteriorating financial situation, ultimately had little choice. On a rainy Tuesday in April, almost exactly 5 years after Aiden's accident, I signed the papers making me the majority owner of PrimeSync Technologies, soon to be renamed Westward Digital Solutions. The purchase price was a fraction of what the company had claimed to be worth, and significantly less than the amount that had been taken from my account. My father couldn't look me in the eye during the signing. My mother dabbed at tears she claimed were from pride, but I knew were from humiliation. Vanessa sat stiffly beside them, her expression unreadable. After the lawyers and board members left, it was just the 4 of us in the conference room where I'd first seen the misleading demo a month earlier. "I hope you're satisfied," my father finally said, breaking the silence. "You've destroyed your sister's dream." "No," I replied, calmly. "I've saved it from destroying itself, and possibly saved you both from legal consequences in the process." "We were trying to help you," my mother insisted, "to bring you back into the family after you shut us out following Aiden's death. By taking my money without asking, by using the technology Aiden and I created without permission? That's not help. That's theft." Vanessa spoke for the first time. "What happens now?" I looked at her directly. "Now we build something real, something honest, something that would make Aiden proud." "And us?" my father asked. "What role do we have in this new company of yours?" "That depends on whether you can accept that what you did was wrong. Not just legally, but morally. I'm not looking for apologies. I'm looking for understanding." None of them responded. I hadn't expected them to. Understanding would come later, if at all. I stood up, gathering my papers. "I have a meeting with the development team in 10 minutes. They deserve to know what's happening and that their jobs are secure. You're welcome to stay, but this meeting is about moving forward, not looking back." As I walked toward the door, Vanessa called out, "Nat, I do understand. Not everything. Not yet. But I'm trying." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. 3 months later, I stood in the newly renovated lobby of Westward Digital Solutions. The large digital display that had once shown PrimeSync's fictional data flows now displayed a simple message: building technology that matters. Behind me, a small team of developers was preparing for a demonstration for potential clients. A real demonstration, showing actual capabilities and honest timelines for features still in development. Vanessa had stayed, accepting a role that played to her strengths in client relations while acknowledging her limitations in technical matters. My parents and I were still navigating a new kind of relationship, more distant, more careful, but slowly rebuilding on a foundation of truth, rather than expectations. The morning sun struggled to break through Portland's persistent April clouds as I sat at my kitchen counter, systematically organizing the documents I'd gathered. 3 weeks had passed since I'd discovered the theft of my savings. and each day had brought new revelations that turned my stomach. What had begun as shock over missing money had evolved into something far more disturbing, a pattern of deliberate erasure I could no longer ignore. My laptop chimed with an email notification. Another message from Eleanor, subject line, "Family dinner reminder." I deleted it without reading. Sunday dinners at the Russo household had been mandatory my entire life, a tradition I dutifully maintained even after Aiden's death. But now, the thought of sitting across from them, pretending everything was normal while they discussed the brilliant future of PrimeSync, made me physically ill. I took a sip of coffee, now cold, and clicked through to PrimeSync's website again. They'd updated it since my last visit. The About Us page now featured a slick video. I pressed play, dreading what I'd see. Vanessa appeared on screen, strolling confidently through their Seattle office space. "At PrimeSync, we believe innovation comes from authentic vision," she said, looking directly into the camera. The shot widened to show her gesturing toward a wall of patents and awards. "Our proprietary AI systems represent years of development and refinement." I paused the video, zooming in on the framed patents visible behind her. My breath caught when I recognized one, a specific approach to inventory prediction that Aiden had conceptualized during our second year of business. We'd never patented it, choosing instead to keep it as a trade secret. Yet there it was, framed on Vanessa's wall of achievements, dated just 6 months ago. My phone buzzed. Marcus. "Are you watching the LinkedIn announcements?" he asked without preamble. "No." "Why?" "PrimeSync just announced a new Chief Innovation Officer, Leo Kim." The name hit me like a physical blow. Leo had been our lead developer at Westline for 3 years. He'd left shortly after Aiden's death, citing the need for a fresh start. He'd been like family to us, had spoken at Aiden's memorial service. "That's not possible," I whispered. "Leo wouldn't." It gets worse. The press release specifically mentions his expertise in groundbreaking inventory prediction systems. They're not even being subtle about it, Nat. I hung up and immediately searched for the announcement. There it was, Leo's familiar face, now sporting designer glasses and a carefully trimmed beard, standing beside Vanessa, both wearing PrimeSync's signature cobalt blue. The betrayal felt like a physical pain in my chest. I scrolled down to the comments section. Dozens of congratulatory messages, including one from my father. "Brilliant addition to an exceptional team. The synergy between Leo's technical vision and Vanessa's leadership will revolutionize the industry." Synergy, one of my father's favorite words. He'd used it when describing Aiden and me, too, back when he still acknowledged the value of what we'd built. Almost mechanically, I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it IP theft. Then, I began documenting every similarity I could find between Westline's technology and what PrimeSync was claiming as their own. The more I looked, the more connections emerged. Not just concepts, but specific implementations, user interface designs, even the naming conventions in some of their publicly available documentation. The afternoon slipped away as I fell deeper into this rabbit hole of discovery. By the time dusk settled outside my window, I had compiled enough evidence to make any intellectual property lawyer salivate. But I felt no triumph, only a hollow ache where trust had once lived. My doorbell rang, startling me from my research trance. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing on my doorstep, a covered dish in her hands. For a moment, I considered not answering, but curiosity won out. I opened the door just enough to make it clear she wasn't being invited inside. "Natalie," she said, offering what approximated a warm smile. "You weren't answering your phone. I brought lasagna. Your favorite." "I'm not hungry," I replied, not reaching for the dish. "Did Dad send you?" Her smile faltered slightly. "No one sent me." I was concerned. You've missed 2 family dinners without explanation." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "If this is about the investment, your father has some exciting updates. The Series B funding is proceeding even better than expected." "You mean, my money is being spent even faster than expected?" Her posture stiffened. "Natalie, this attitude is unproductive. We're all on the same team here, the family team." "Is that what we are? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm just a convenient funding source. That's unfair. We've supported you through everything. College, that business with Aiden, your grief afterward. We carried you. That business with Aiden. Like our years of work had been some frivolous hobby." "You didn't carry me," I said, my voice steadier. Then I felt. "I built something valuable, something real. And now you've taken that and handed it to Vanessa to claim as her own innovation." Eleanor's eyes widened, genuine confusion crossing her face. "What are you talking about?" "PrimeSync's revolutionary technology. Did you know it's built on intellectual property that Aiden and I developed? Did you know they just hired our former lead developer?" She shifted the dish to her other hand, discomfort evident in her posture. "The tech industry is small, Natalie. Overlap happens. Besides, Vanessa has been working on these concepts for years." "No, she hasn't. She's been working on failures for years. Now suddenly she has working tech that looks remarkably like what Westline already built and sold." "You're being paranoid, and frankly a bit selfish. Your sister is finally finding success. Can't you just be happy for her?" I stared at my mother, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time. The perfectly coiffed hair, the expensive but understated jewelry, the practiced expression of maternal concern that never quite reached. Her eyes. "I need to get back to work," I said finally. "You can leave the lasagna if you want." She didn't. She clutched it tighter as if it were a shield. "Your father was right. You've changed since Aiden died. Become harder, less family-oriented." "No, Mom. I've become clearer about what matters and who I can trust." I closed the door before she could respond. Through the wood, I heard her sigh, then the sound of her heels clicking down the hallway toward the elevator. I returned to my laptop, to the growing file of evidence, with a new sense of resolve hardening inside me. 2 days later, I was sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment, waiting for Leo Kim. After discovering his new role at PrimeSync, I'd sent him a short, carefully neutral email congratulating him on the position and suggesting we catch up. To my surprise, he'd agreed immediately. The door chimed, and there he was, the man who had once worked 80-hour weeks alongside Aiden and me to meet our first major client deadline, who had crashed on our office couch for a month when his apartment flooded, who had sobbed openly at Aiden's funeral. Now he wore an expensive watch and carried himself with the practiced ease of someone who had recently come into money. "Natalie!" He embraced me warmly, as if we were still friends. "God, it's been what, 2 years?" 3, I corrected, not returning his enthusiasm. "You left 6 months after Aiden died." His smile faltered slightly as he sat down across from me. "Right, that was a difficult time for all of us. Seems like you've landed on your feet." He grinned, tapping the face of his watch. "Can't complain. PrimeSync is doing incredible things, cutting-edge stuff." I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching him over the rim of the cup. "So I've heard. Their AI-driven inventory prediction system sounds particularly impressive." His eyes flickered briefly, the first sign of discomfort. "It's revolutionary. Vanessa has assembled an amazing team." "I'm sure she has, including you." I set my cup down carefully. "Leo, their core technology looks remarkably similar to what we built at Westline, what you, Aiden, and I built together." He shifted in his seat, glancing around the cafe as if checking who might overhear. "There are only so many ways to approach these problems, Nat. The underlying math is the same. Everywhere. Is that what you tell yourself? Because I've been comparing documentation, and the similarities go far beyond underlying mathematical approaches. They extend to specific implementations we developed. Proprietary methods. Leo leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, I didn't come here to be accused of anything. The industry evolves. People bring their expertise from job to job. That's how innovation works. Innovation or theft? His expression hardened. Be careful, Natalie. You sold Westline. Whatever IP they had belongs to the acquiring company now. You don't have standing to make accusations. I'm not making accusations, yet. I'm trying to understand how my dead partner's work ended up as the cornerstone of my sister's supposedly groundbreaking startup. The same startup that my parents invested my money in without my knowledge. Leo's eyebrows shot up. What do you mean, without your knowledge? For a moment, I saw a flicker of the old Leo, the one who had integrity, who cared about right and wrong. I decided to take a chance. They emptied my account, the proceeds from Westline's sale, nearly $400,000. They did it using a family trust mechanism I never agreed to fund PrimeSync's Series B round. He sat back, genuinely stunned. Jesus, Nat, I had no idea. Vanessa said you were an enthusiastic investor, that you saw the potential and wanted to be part of it. And you believe that? After how close we all were? You didn't think it was worth a single phone call to verify? He had the decency to look ashamed. I should have reached out. Things were complicated after Aiden. I felt like I was intruding on your grief. And then when Vanessa approached me about this opportunity, he trailed off. What did she offer you, Leo? Money? Stock options? Both, he admitted quietly. Plus the chance to finish what we started at Westline, to take those concepts to a much larger scale. Those weren't just concepts. They were Aiden's life's work, and mine. Leo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me, conflict evident in his expression. I have to get back to Seattle. Investor meeting tomorrow. He hesitated. Natalie, I'm sorry about the money. That's messed up. But the technology. It's not as simple as theft. We've built on what existed, improved it. With a foundation you didn't create or pay for. He stood, adjusting his expensive jacket. What do you want from me, Nat? I can't change what's happened. I looked up at him, this man I had once trusted implicitly. No, you can't, but you could tell the truth. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. Take care of yourself, Nat. For what it's worth, I think about Aiden all the time. He would have been amazed by what we're building now. After he left, I sat motionless, his words echoing in my head. He would have been amazed. The casual appropriation of not just Aiden's work, but his presumed approval made me feel physically ill. I pulled out my phone and texted Marcus. Just met with Leo. It's worse than we thought. They know exactly what they're doing. His response came almost immediately. What's our next move? I didn't have an answer yet. But as I walked home through Portland's light rain, something was crystallizing inside me. A determination colder and more focused than anger. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about memory, about truth, about making sure Aiden's work wasn't stolen and repackaged as someone else's innovation. When I reached my apartment building, I found Richard Russo waiting in the lobby, seated in one of the faux leather chairs with a manila envelope on his lap. He stood when he saw me, his expression that particular blend of authority and condescension. He reserved for discussions he considered educational. Natalie, he said, as if we'd planned this meeting. I was beginning to wonder if you were avoiding me. I am, I replied flatly. What do you want? If my directness bothered him, he didn't show it. I brought you something, information I think you'll find enlightening. He held out the envelope. I made no move to take it. About what? PrimeSync's latest valuation. The Series B round is oversubscribed. Investors fighting to get in. Your initial investment has already appreciated substantially. He said, this with evident pride, as if expecting gratitude. It wasn't an investment, it was a theft. His expression hardened. That's an ugly word for a family financial decision. Did Leo Kim call you? Is that why you're here? A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he regained his composure. Leo? No. What does he have to do with this? Everything. He's building PrimeSync's revolutionary technology on the foundation of Westline's intellectual property. My intellectual property. Aiden's intellectual property. Richard waved a dismissive hand. The tech industry is built on iteration, Natalie. No idea is truly original. That defense might work better if they hadn't specifically hired our lead developer and copied our proprietary methods. My father set the envelope down on the lobby table between us. I didn't come here to argue about technical details I don't fully understand. I came because your mother is worried. You've been distant, unresponsive. It's not healthy. What's not healthy is having my life's work stolen by my own family. He sighed deeply, the sound perfected over decades of dealing with what he considered irrational behavior. No one has stolen anything from you. We've invested your money in a promising opportunity, one that's already showing remarkable returns. And as for this notion that Vanessa has somehow stolen your technology, Natalie, you sold your company. You were done with that chapter. Why can't you be happy that those ideas live on in a new context? I stared at him, genuinely stunned by his ability to reframe exploitation as generosity. Because it's fraud, Dad. Both the money and the technology. And deep down, I think you know that. For a brief moment, something like uncertainty crossed his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the confident mask I'd seen my entire life. What I know is that you're still grieving, still trapped in the past. Aiden would want you to move forward, not obsess over who gets credit for which algorithm. The casual invocation of Aiden's name, what he would want, what he would think, ignited something in me. Don't you dare tell me what Aiden would want. You barely acknowledged him when he was alive. Called our business a tech hobby until we landed our first 7-figure client. That's not true. I always supported your endeavors. No, you tolerated them. There's a difference. I picked up the envelope and handed it back to him. I don't need your valuation reports. I need my money back. And I need an acknowledgement that what PrimeSync is building isn't original innovation. It's appropriation. He didn't take the envelope. This conversation isn't productive. When you're ready to be reasonable, you know where to find us. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Natalie, your grandfather's trust is ironclad. The investment decision was legally sound. You might want to remember that before making accusations you can't substantiate. After he left, I stood in the lobby for several minutes, the envelope still in my hand. Finally, curiosity won out. I opened it and examined the contents. Glossy projections of PrimeSync's growth trajectory, an updated investor prospectus, and a personal note from my father stating that my initial investment had already appreciated by 22%. What caught my eye, however, was a small detail in the technical documentation, a diagram illustrating the company's data processing flow. In the corner, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it, was a notation that had been Aiden's personal shorthand, a small symbol he'd used to mark sections he'd personally coded. It was like seeing a ghost, hidden in plain sight within Vanessa's supposed innovation. I took the elevator to my apartment, a plan beginning to form. I needed more than just suspicions or technical similarities. I needed indisputable proof that would stand up to legal scrutiny. And I needed to understand exactly how deep this betrayal went. Inside my apartment, I pulled out a dusty external hard drive I hadn't touched in over a year. It contained all the original development files from Westline, our entire codebase, including Aiden's earliest prototypes and notes. I'd kept it as a sentimental memento more than anything else, never imagining I'd need it for evidence. As the files copied to my laptop, I thought about my father's parting comment about my grandfather's trust. I'd never paid much attention to the family trust. It had always been presented as a tax vehicle, something that would only become relevant after my parents' deaths. But now I needed to understand exactly what it entailed and what rights it might have given them over my assets. I called Grace Emerson, my godmother and my parents' oldest friend. Unlike my parents, Grace had actually shown up consistently after Aiden's death, bringing food, sitting with me through the worst nights, never once suggesting I needed to move on or be strong. "Natalie, sweetheart, it's been too long." Her warm voice immediately soothed some of the tension I'd been carrying. "Grace, I need to ask you something about my grandfather's trust. You were there when it was set up, right? You're one of the witnesses on the original documents." A pause. "Yes, that's right. But why the sudden interest? Your father has always handled those matters." "That's part of the problem. I need to understand what rights the trust might give him over my personal assets." Another, longer pause. "Natalie, what's going on? You sound troubled." I took a deep breath and told her everything. The missing money, the intellectual property theft, my growing realization that my family saw me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited for Vanessa's benefit. When I finished, the silence stretched so long I thought we might have been disconnected. Finally, Grace spoke, her voice heavy. "I was afraid something like this might happen. Not this specific scenario, but the pattern is familiar." "What do you mean?" "Your parents have always had a certain vision for the family, with very specific roles assigned to each of you. Vanessa as the standard bearer, the face of the Russo legacy, and you as the support system, the safety net. But the trust, does it actually give them the right to take my money without my consent?" Grace sighed. "The original trust your grandfather established was quite traditional. It included provisions for education, healthcare, certain approved investments. But Richard amended it significantly after he took over as trustee. I was uncomfortable with some of the changes, but he assured me they were necessary for tax purposes." "Ok, what kind of changes?" "Expanded powers for the primary trustee, broader definitions of family benefit that could justify certain financial decisions. But Natalie, even with those amendments, what you're describing sounds extreme. I'd need to see the specific documents they use to access your account. Can you help me get copies of the original trust and all amendments? I should have copies in my files. Give me a day or two to locate them." She paused. "Natalie, be careful. If what you're saying about the intellectual property is true, there's more at stake here than just your savings. Prime Sync has major investors now, powerful people who won't appreciate revelations of fraud." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen island, surrounded by fragments of evidence, bank statements, trust documents, technical comparisons, the Prime Sync prospectus with Aiden's mark hidden in the corner. Pieces of a puzzle that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. My phone chimed with a text message. "Vanessa. Dad said you two talked. Can we meet? Just you and me. There are things you don't understand." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue building my case from a safe distance. But another part needed to hear what she would say, what possible justification she could offer for this systematic betrayal. I texted back, "Tomorrow. That cafe, near Pike Place. Noon." Her response came immediately. "Thank you, I'll be there." I set down my phone and turned back to my laptop. If I was going to confront Vanessa, I needed to be fully prepared. I opened the Westline code archives and began a systematic comparison with the technical documentation from Prime Sync's investor package. Line by line, module by module, I traced the evolution of our ideas into their supposed innovation. The similarities were beyond coincidental. Entire architectural approaches, specific algorithmic solutions, even some of the variable naming conventions were identical or only superficially altered. It was as if they'd taken our code, changed just enough to create plausible deniability, and presented it as revolutionary. Around 2 a.m., I found what I was looking for, a critical component of PrimeSync's AI prediction system that contained a distinctive error handling approach Aiden had developed. It was so unique it was practically a signature, an elegant solution, to a complex problem that we'd never published or shared outside the company. I saved the comparison, marked it as Exhibit A, and continued searching. By dawn, I had compiled a devastating dossier of evidence. Not just technical similarities, but a clear timeline showing how PrimeSync's breakthroughs consistently followed access to Westline's proprietary information. As the first light of morning broke through my apartment windows, I sent everything to Marcus with a simple message. Meeting Vanessa today. Keep this safe, just in case. The drive to Seattle took longer than usual. Heavy rain slowed traffic on I-5, and by the time I arrived at the cafe, I was running 10 minutes late. Vanessa was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee and a small plate of pastries. She'd dressed down from her usual corporate armor, jeans and a simple sweater instead of her signature power suits. She stood when she saw me, an uncertain smile on her face. Nat, thanks for coming. I sat across from her, not returning the smile. You said there are things I don't understand. I'm listening. She pushed one of the coffee cups toward me. I ordered your usual. Oat milk, 1 sugar. I didn't touch it. Let's not pretend this is a friendly catch-up, Vanessa. She sighed, deflating slightly. Fair enough. Look, I know you're upset about the investment situation. Dad explained that there was a miscommunication. There was no miscommunication. There was no communication at all. He took my money without my knowledge or consent. He said he discussed it with you. He lied. Vanessa looked genuinely startled. But why would he? That doesn't make sense. Doesn't it? It makes perfect sense if the goal was to funnel my resources into your company, whether I agreed or not. I leaned forward. Just like it makes sense that your revolutionary technology looks remarkably similar to what Aiden and I built at Westline. Her expression shifted, a flicker of guilt quickly replaced by defensiveness. Our technology is built on multiple sources and approaches. Yes, some elements may be similar to what you developed, but that's how innovation works. We iterate, we improve, we build on existing ideas. You hired our lead developer. Leo is brilliant. Of course I wanted him on our team. And the fact that he brought detailed knowledge of our proprietary methods was just a bonus? She took a sip of her coffee, buying time. Natalie, I understand. You feel protective of Aiden's legacy. But technology moves forward. What you built together was impressive for its time, but the field has evolved. Has it? Because what I'm seeing isn't evolution. It's appropriation. Right down to core. Algorithms that Aiden personally developed. For a moment, Vanessa's carefully constructed facade cracked. What do you want from me, Nat? An admission that we were inspired by your work? Fine. We were. An acknowledgement that we built on your foundation? Yes, we did. But we've also expanded it, improved it, made it viable for enterprise-scale implementation. With my money you knew I never agreed to invest. She set down her cup, a hint of genuine regret crossing her face. I truly didn't know that, Nat. I believed Dad when he said you were on board. I would never have. She trailed off. Wouldn't you? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like a pattern. Taking what isn't freely given. Claiming credit for work you didn't do. That's not fair. I've put everything into PrimeSync. 3 years of my life, Endless pitches, rejections, pivots. I've earned whatever success we achieve. By standing on Aiden's shoulders without acknowledgement, by using his ideas, his code, his vision. Vanessa's expression hardened. You don't have a monopoly on grief, Natalie. I loved him too, you. No. He was like a brother to me. The casual claim sent a surge of anger through me. A brother you've conveniently erased from the innovation you're now claiming as your own. We haven't erased him. His influence is present in everything we do. His influence or his actual work? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. I brought something for you. Our latest capitalization, table and valuation. Your investment? It wasn't an investment. The funds, she corrected, have already appreciated significantly. When we close this round, your share will be worth nearly double the original amount. I stared at her, genuinely bewildered by her inability to understand the fundamental issue. Do you really think this is about money? About return on investment? Isn't it? You kept talking about buying a house, making a home. This will give you that and more. What I wanted wasn't just any house. It was a specific place where I could honor what Aiden and I built together. A place where I could feel his presence and continue our work in my own way. And it wasn't just about the money. It was about having agency, about making my own choices rather than having them made for me. Vanessa sat back, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You've changed, Nat. You used to be the easygoing one, the one who didn't mind stepping back, letting others take the lead. Is that how you saw me? As someone who didn't mind being overlooked? Whose work and wishes could be disregarded because I wouldn't make a fuss? I shook my head. Maybe I have changed, or maybe I've finally recognized a pattern I should have, seen years ago. She placed her hand on the folder between us. What do you want, Natalie? Tell me, and I'll try to make it right. I want acknowledgement. Full public acknowledgement that PrimeSync's core technology builds directly on Westline's innovations. I want Aiden credited as a foundational contributor, and I want my money returned, all of it, plus whatever appreciation you claim it's earned. Vanessa paled. The first two requests would destroy our narrative with investors. They've bought into PrimeSync as a revolutionary disruptor, not an iterative improvement on existing technology. And the money. It's already been deployed. We can't just return it without significant consequences. That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. Be reasonable, Nat. I'm trying to find a middle ground here. There is no middle ground on theft, whether it's theft of money or theft of intellectual property. Vanessa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at me, conflict evident in her expression. That's the office. I have an investor call in 20 minutes. Of course you do. I stood up. You know what's ironic? If you'd approached me honestly from the beginning, acknowledged Westline's influence, asked for my input or investment properly, I probably would have supported you. I would have been proud to see Aiden's work continue and evolve. Instead, you chose this path. She stood as well, gathering her things. It's not too late, Nat. We can still find a way forward that works for everyone. Just don't do anything rash for the family's sake. The family's sake, I repeated flatly. That's always the final appeal, isn't it? As if family only works in one direction. My sacrifice for your benefit. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. He would have wanted you to let this go, Nat. Aiden wasn't one to hold grudges. I looked back at her, a cold clarity, settling over me. Don't invoke his name to manipulate me. You didn't know him like I did, and he valued truth above all else. As I walked away, leaving her standing by the table with her untouched folder of projections, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but now they were hardening into resolve. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was taken from me. It was about ensuring that the truth, about my money, about Aiden's work, about the foundations of PrimeSync's supposed innovation, could no longer be ignored or rewritten. I got into my car and texted Marcus. Meeting done. They're not going. To make this right. Time for Plan B. His response was immediate. I'm ready when you are. I started the engine, rain drumming on the roof as I pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, I could see Vanessa still standing outside the Chiu Cafe watching me drive away. For the first time since this began, I felt not just angry but powerful. They had taken my money, appropriated Aiden's work, and expected me to accept it with gratitude. They had drastically underestimated what I was willing to do to set things right. The spring rain tapped steadily against my apartment windows as I spread documents across my dining table. I'd been gathering evidence for 3 weeks now, meticulously building a case that no one could dismiss. Every folder was color-coded, every document highlighted and annotated. My collection had grown from a simple timeline to a comprehensive dossier that would make any prosecuting attorney proud. Marcus called while I was still organizing. Did you get what I sent? Just downloading it now. I pulled up the email on my laptop. How did you manage to get internal technical documentation from PrimeSync? Let's just say not everyone there is happy with how things are being run. Danielle isn't the only developer with concerns about the ethical implications. I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. This should be the final piece we need, their actual codebase compared to Westline's original architecture. The files finished downloading, and I opened them side by side with Aiden's original work. The similarities were undeniable, not just conceptual parallels but specific implementations, distinctive approaches to complex problems that had been Aiden's unique contribution to the field. This is it, Marcus. This is what we needed. My voice was steady, calmer than I'd felt in weeks. With this, no one can claim these are just industry-standard approaches or coincidental similarities. What's your next move? I looked down at the neat array of evidence before me. I have a meeting with Grace tomorrow. She's found the original trust documents and says there are irregularities in how they've been amended. Irregularities as in fraud? Possibly. At the very least, misrepresentation. I paused. Once I have that piece, I'm setting up a meeting with Ms. Chen, the lawyer you recommended. It's time to move this from investigation to action. After we hung up, I continued organizing the evidence, creating a clear narrative that connected the theft of my money to the misappropriation of Westline's intellectual property. By midnight, I had assembled a presentation so damning that even my father, with all his financial and legal resources, wouldn't be able to dismiss it. I slept soundly that night for the first time in weeks. Not because I felt peace. There was no peace in what I'd discovered, but because I finally had clarity. The path forward was no longer clouded by confusion or self-doubt. I knew exactly what had happened and what needed to be done. Grace's office was in one of Portland's older buildings downtown, a beautiful brick structure that had been thoughtfully modernized while preserving its historic character. Much like Grace herself, I thought as I rode the elevator to the 10th floor. At 68, she had the energy and sharp intellect of someone decades younger, combined with the wisdom that only comes from experience. She greeted me with a warm hug. Natalie, you look better than when we last spoke. More resolute. I feel it, I admitted, as I followed her into her spacious corner office. It's easier somehow, now that I know exactly what I'm dealing with. She gestured for me to sit in one of the comfortable chairs across from her desk. Well, what you're dealing with may be even more troubling than you initially thought. She placed a thick folder on the desk between us. I found the original trust documents, along with all subsequent amendments. And? Grace removed her reading glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. The original trust your grandfather established was quite standard, conservative even. It was designed primarily as a vehicle for passing assets to the next generation, with minimal tax implications. There were provisions for educational expenses, medical needs, first home purchases, that sort of thing. Nothing about investment powers? Limited ones. The trustee, originally your grandfather, then your father after his passing, could make certain pre-approved investments. Treasury bonds, blue-chip stocks, established mutual funds. Nothing speculative. I leaned forward. So how did my father justify using trust assets to invest in a high-risk startup? Grace opened the folder and handed me a document dated approximately 5 years earlier. This is where things get concerning. This amendment significantly expanded the trustee's powers, allowing for investments in family business ventures without requiring approval from beneficiaries. I scanned the document, noting my signature at the bottom. I don't remember signing this. I was afraid you might say that. Grace's expression was grave. Richard presented this to me as a minor administrative update that all family members had agreed to. He already had signatures from Eleanor and Vanessa. I never saw this document before today, Grace. I certainly never agreed to give my father unilateral power to invest my money in family business ventures. She nodded slowly. I suspected as much. There's more. She handed me another document, this one dated just a few months before my savings had been taken. This amendment specifically addresses assets received from business sales or similar windfalls. It classifies them as subject to trustee discretion for family growth opportunities for a period of 5 years after receipt. My heart raced as I examined this document. Again, my signature appeared at the bottom, but I had absolutely no recollection of ever seeing it. This is forgery, Grace. I never signed this. She took the document back, examining it closely. The signature does look like yours, but there are ways to create convincing forgeries. Or perhaps you signed a different document and this page was substituted later. Either way, it's fraud. I felt a cold anger settling in my chest. He created these amendments specifically to access my money when the time came. This was premeditated. Grace was quiet for a moment, her expression pained. Natalie, if you pursue this, if you claim these signatures are fraudulent, you need to understand what that means. This goes beyond family disagreement. It's criminal. I know. I met her gaze steadily. And I'm prepared for that. This isn't just about money, Grace. It's about years of manipulation and exploitation. It's about them stealing Aiden's legacy and erasing his contributions. She reached across the desk to squeeze my hand. I've known your family for over 30 years. I've watched you grow up, watched the dynamics between you and Vanessa, between you and your parents. I always saw what was happening, but I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. What do you mean? Grace sighed. The way they consistently prioritized Vanessa's endeavors over yours. The way they took your resilience for granted. Assumed you would always be the one to bend, to accommodate, to sacrifice. Even after Aiden's death, when you were shattered. They allowed you a brief period of grief, then expected you to fall back into the role they'd assigned you. Her words hit me with unexpected force. To hear someone else articulate the pattern I'd only recently recognized myself was both validating and painful. I should have said something years ago, Grace continued. Maybe if I had, it wouldn't have escalated to this point. This isn't your fault, I assured her. I should have seen it myself, should have established boundaries long before now. She smiled sadly. We both know it's not that simple. Family patterns are insidious precisely because they're established early, when we have no defenses against them. She closed the folder and handed it to me. Take these. Show them to your lawyer. And Natalie, whatever you decide to do next, I will support you. I left Grace's office with the folder clutched tightly under my arm, feeling as though I was carrying explosives. In a way, I was. These documents, combined with the technical evidence Marcus had gathered, had the power to destroy not just PrimeSync but potentially my family as well. As I drove home, I thought about what that would mean. Criminal charges against my father for fraud. The collapse of Vanessa's company when investors learned the truth about their intellectual property claims. The public humiliation for all of them. Part of me recoiled from causing such devastation, even after what they'd done. They were still my family. But another part, a stronger part, recognized that they had made their choices knowingly, repeatedly, over years. They had chosen to exploit rather than respect me, to appropriate rather than honor Aiden's work, to lie rather than admit wrongdoing. By the time I reached my apartment, I had made my decision. I called Ms. Chen's office and scheduled an appointment for the following morning. "Bring everything you've gathered," her assistant advised. "Ms. Chen will want to review all evidence before discussing potential courses of action." That evening, I carefully packed every document, every comparison, every piece of evidence into a secure portfolio. I included Grace's trust documents, bank records showing the unauthorized transfer, and the technical analysis proving PrimeSync's reliance on Westline's intellectual property. As I worked, my phone repeatedly lit up with notifications, text messages from my mother asking why I hadn't been returning her calls, an email from my father with the subject line, "Important family business discussion," a voicemail from Vanessa that I didn't bother to listen to. I silenced my phone and continued preparing. This wasn't about vendetta or even justice exactly. It was about truth, about ensuring that what Aiden and I had built wouldn't be erased or claimed by others, about finally demanding the respect and autonomy I'd never insisted upon before. The next morning, I dressed with unusual care. A tailored charcoal suit I hadn't worn since selling Westline. Simple pearl earrings Aiden had given me for our last anniversary. Armor of a sort, but also a reminder of what I was fighting for. Ms. Chen's office was in a gleaming downtown tower, all glass and steel, a stark contrast to Grace's more traditional space. The receptionist led me to a sleek conference room where Ms. Chen was already waiting, reviewing some documents. She stood as I entered, a compact woman with precisely styled black hair and penetrating dark eyes. "Ms. Russo, thank you for coming in." Her handshake was firm, her gaze assessing. "I've been reviewing the preliminary information you shared. It's compelling." "I've brought everything," I said, placing my portfolio on the table. "Financial records, trust documents, technical comparisons, it's all here." For the next 2 hours, we went through every piece of evidence methodically. Ms. Chen occasionally asked clarifying questions or made notes, but mostly she listened and read with intense focus. When we finally finished, she sat back, tapping, her pen thoughtfully against her legal pad. "You have a strong case on multiple fronts," she said after a moment. "The trust documents show clear irregularities. The financial transfers were made without proper authorization, and the intellectual property evidence is particularly damning." She met my gaze directly. "The question now is what you want to achieve. I want my money back, and I want acknowledgement of Westline's, of Aiden's contribution to what PrimeSync claims as their own innovation. Both reasonable objectives, but there are different paths we could take to achieve them, with different levels of collateral damage, let's say." "What do you mean?" Ms. Chen leaned forward. "We could pursue this as a purely civil matter. File suit against the trust, against your father personally, against PrimeSync. Demand financial restitution and proper attribution. That path would likely lead to settlement negotiations. And the alternative? The evidence suggests criminal fraud in the trust amendments and potentially securities fraud in PrimeSync's representations to investors. We could take this to the district attorney, to the SEC. That path would be more public, more damaging to all involved, but might also be more definitive." I considered her words carefully. "What would you recommend?" "Strategically, Start with the civil approach, but position ourselves to escalate if necessary. Draft complaints on all fronts, but file only the most straightforward. The unauthorized fund transfer, initially. Use that as leverage to open settlement discussions. And if they refuse to settle? A small, hard smile crossed her face. Then we escalate, step by step, until they understand exactly what they're facing. People like your father, successful, respected, used to operating within certain parameters. They often can't conceive of how quickly their carefully constructed world can unravel when fraud allegations become public. Her assessment aligned with my own thinking. I didn't want destruction for its own sake. I wanted recognition, restitution, and a fundamental change in how my family saw and treated me. There's one more factor to consider, Ms. Chen added. Timing. PrimeSync is currently in a critical phase, finalizing their Series B funding round. That creates both opportunity and risk. They're more vulnerable now, but also more dangerous. Cornered animals and all that. I nodded, understanding the implication. How quickly can we move? I can have initial paperwork ready by early next week. But before we file anything, I suggest one more attempt at direct resolution. A meeting where you present your evidence and demands clearly, with me present as your counsel. Sometimes the mere presence of a lawyer is enough to change the dynamic. You think they'll agree to such a meeting? If we frame it properly, not as an accusation, but as an opportunity to resolve family matters privately before they become legal issues. I considered this approach. It made sense. One final chance for them to do the right thing, with the clear understanding that I was prepared to take more drastic measures if necessary. Let's do it. Set up the meeting. Over. The next 3 days, Ms. Chen and I prepared meticulously. We created a presentation of the evidence, drafted a clear set of demands, and rehearsed how to respond to various objections or deflections my family might attempt. She sent a carefully worded email to my parents and Vanessa, requesting a family discussion regarding financial and intellectual property matters, with legal representation present. My father replied within hours, his tone oscillating between concern and condescension. Natalie, involving lawyers in family matters seems extreme. We can surely resolve any misunderstandings without such formality. However, if you insist on this approach, we will of course accommodate you. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon at my parents' home. Neutral ground was suggested but rejected by my father. A small power play I chose not to contest. What mattered was getting them all in one room with the evidence before them. Friday arrived with unseasonable sunshine, as if the weather itself was conspiring to create a false sense of optimism. I picked up Ms. Chen at her office, and we drove to the West Hills in silence, each mentally preparing for the confrontation ahead. My mother opened the door before we could ring the bell, her smile tight and her eyes wary. Natalie, and this must be Ms. Chen. Please come in. She led us to the formal living room, a space rarely used except for my mother's charity committee meetings and my father's occasional client dinners. Richard and Vanessa were already seated, both dressed with careful casualness that nevertheless conveyed authority. A clear, united front. My father stood as we entered, extending his hand to Ms. Chen. Richard Russo, thank you for coming. Though I must say I find this level of formality unnecessary for a family discussion. Ms. Chen shook his hand briefly. Sometimes a structured approach helps ensure all perspectives are heard and respected. Indeed. He gestured to the seating arrangement, he and Vanessa on one sofa, with 2 chairs positioned across from them for me and Ms. Chen. Another small power play in the staging. Once we were seated, my father took control of the conversation immediately. Natalie has expressed some concerns about family investment decisions, and apparently feels these concerns rise to the level of requiring legal counsel. We're here to listen and hopefully resolve any misunderstandings. Ms. Chen gave me a subtle nod, our prearranged signal that I should lead this initial phase. This isn't about misunderstandings, I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. This is about deliberate actions taken without my knowledge or consent. Specifically, the transfer of $387,000 from my personal savings account into PrimeSync's Series B funding round. My father frowned. We've already discussed this. The transfer was made under the provisions of the family trust. Provisions that were fraudulently added, I interrupted, opening my portfolio and removing the amended trust documents. I never signed these amendments, Dad. Never even saw them until Grace showed them to me this week. My mother gasped softly. My father's expression didn't change, but I noticed his hand tighten slightly on the armrest. That's a serious accusation, he said after a moment. One I categorically deny. You signed those amendments yourself. I remember the discussion clearly. Then you won't mind if we submit them for forensic handwriting analysis, or if we depose the witnesses to these signatures, because I'm absolutely certain they will not hold up to scrutiny. A flash of something, uncertainty, fear, crossed his face before his mask of confidence returned. This is absurd. We're talking about standard trust administration, not some cloak and dagger conspiracy. Ms. Chen spoke up. Mr. Russo, I've reviewed these documents thoroughly. The amendments represent a significant and unusual expansion of trustee powers, specifically tailored to allow access to Ms. Russo's assets from the sale of her company. This goes well beyond standard trust administration. Vanessa, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Natalie, if you felt the investment was inappropriate, why didn't you say something sooner? It's been months. Because I didn't know about it until I tried to access my savings to buy the house I'd been planning for. The house I had explicitly told all of you was my intention for those funds. These accusations are groundless, my father interjected, and frankly, hurtful. Everything we've done has been for the benefit of this family, including you, Natalie. That brings us to the second issue, I continued, removing another set of documents from my portfolio. PrimeSync's intellectual property claims, specifically the fact that your revolutionary technology is built on the foundation of Westline's proprietary methods. Methods that Aiden developed. Methods that you've now claimed as your own innovation. Vanessa paled visibly. That's not true. We've developed our own approaches, our own solutions. Really? I spread out the technical comparisons on the coffee table between us. These are side-by-side comparisons of Westline's original code architecture and PrimeSync's current systems. The similarities aren't just striking. They're unmistakable. Right down to Aiden's distinctive error handling methodology and variable naming conventions. My father glanced at the documents but made no move to examine them closely. Technological development is iterative by nature. Similar problems often yield similar solutions. Not this similar, Ms. Chen countered, pointing to a specific comparison. This goes well beyond coincidental similarity or industry-standard approaches. This shows direct derivation. You hired our lead developer, I added, looking directly at Vanessa. You gained access to our technical documentation through family connections. You built your company on the foundation of what Aiden and I created, without acknowledgement or compensation. Vanessa's composure finally cracked. We didn't steal anything. We were inspired by your work, yes. We built on concepts you had already developed, but we've taken them further, applied them in new contexts. Without attribution, without licensing, without permission. My father stood abruptly. This meeting is becoming unproductive. Natalie, you're clearly upset, but these accusations are both hurtful and potentially damaging to Vanessa's company at a critical juncture. Ms. Chen remained seated, her voice level. Mr. Russo, we haven't yet presented our proposed resolution. Perhaps you'd like to hear it before ending the discussion? He paused, then sat back down reluctantly. Fine. What is it you want? I looked at each of them in turn. My father, defensive and dismissive. My mother, distressed and confused. Vanessa, caught between defiance and fear. I want 3 things, I said clearly. First, the full return of my funds, plus interest, at market rate. Second, formal acknowledgement in all PrimeSync materials and presentations that your core technology builds on foundational work developed by Westline Solutions, with specific credit to Aiden West. Third, a licensing agreement that properly compensates me for the use of intellectual property I legally own. That's outrageous, my father sputtered. The money has already been deployed in the company. It can't simply be returned without significant disruption, and the acknowledgement you're demanding would raise questions with investors about the originality of PrimeSync's technology. Those sound like problems that should have been considered before taking my money and my intellectual property without permission, I replied calmly. Ms. Chen placed a document on the table. We've prepared a settlement agreement outlining these terms. I suggest you review it with your own counsel. We're prepared to give you 1 week to consider and respond before we file formal complaints. Complaints? My mother finally spoke, her voice thin with anxiety. What kind of complaints? Civil action regarding the unauthorized transfer of funds and intellectual property infringement to start, Ms. Chen explained. Though we've also prepared documentation regarding potential trust fraud and securities violations should those become necessary. The room fell silent. The implications hung in the air. Public litigation, possible criminal charges, the collapse of PrimeSync's carefully constructed image, the damage to my father's professional reputation. Vanessa was the first to break. We can work something out. The acknowledgement. We could frame it as a partnership, a collaboration, a synthesis of complementary approaches. My father shot her a warning look. We're not agreeing to anything today. We'll need to review these claims thoroughly with our own legal team. Of course, Ms. Chen replied smoothly. As I said, you have 1 week. After that, we proceed with filing. We gathered our documents and stood to leave. As Ms. Chen headed toward the door, I lingered for a moment, looking at my family, these people who shared my blood but had somehow become strangers. I didn't want it to come to this, I said quietly. If you had asked instead of taken, if you had acknowledged instead of erased, we wouldn't be here now. My mother reached for my hand. Natalie, please. We can still resolve this as a family. I gently withdrew my hand from hers. That's what I'm trying to do. Resolve it properly, once and for all. But it has to be based on truth and respect, not manipulation and exploitation. As I turned to leave, my father's voice stopped me. You're making a mistake, Natalie. Some doors, once closed, can never be reopened. I looked back at him, at the man who had shaped so much of my life through both presence and absence. I'm not closing doors, Dad. I'm finally opening them. To the truth, to accountability, to a relationship based on mutual respect rather than convenience. The drive back to the city was quiet, the weight of what had just transpired settling over us. Finally, Ms. Chen spoke. They'll settle. Your father particularly. He has too much to lose by fighting this publicly. Are you sure? He's not accustomed to backing down. He's not accustomed to facing opponents who are truly prepared to go the distance. You are. She glanced at me. For what it's worth, you handled that beautifully. Clear, factual, emotionally controlled but not detached. Perfect. I nodded. Though perfect was the last word I would have used to describe the painful confrontation. What happens now? Now we wait. Give them time to consult their lawyers, to understand the full implications of what they're facing. They'll reach out before the deadline. And if they don't? A small, determined smile. Then we show them we weren't bluffing. The week that followed was strangely calm. I returned to my consulting work, maintained my exercise routine, even managed to sleep reasonably well. It was as if having finally brought everything into the open had released some of the tension I'd been carrying for months. My family's response was radio silence. No calls, no texts, no emails. I hadn't expected otherwise. They would be conferring with lawyers, assessing their vulnerabilities, calculating the costs of fighting versus settling. On the 6th day, Ms. Chen called. "We've received a response from their counsel. They want to meet tomorrow to discuss terms." "They're ready? To settle?" They haven't said that explicitly, but the tone suggests they're looking for resolution rather than confrontation. I think they've realized how strong our position is. What should I expect? Counteroffers, certainly. They'll try to minimize the financial impact and limit the scope of any public acknowledgments. They may offer partial compliance with our demands in exchange for confidentiality agreements. I considered this. How should we respond? That depends on your priorities. Is getting your money back most important? The acknowledgement of Westline's contribution? Or simply ensuring they understand they can't treat you this way anymore? The question made me pause. What did I truly want from this painful process? All of those things matter, I said finally. But most of all, I want this resolved in a way that honors Aiden's work and establishes clear boundaries for the future. I'm not looking to destroy them, just to correct a profound injustice. Then we'll approach tomorrow with flexibility on the details, but firmness on the principles. Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow may be challenging, but I believe we'll achieve what you're seeking. After we hung up, I went to my closet and pulled out a small wooden box I kept on the top shelf. Inside was a collection of memorabilia from my time with Aiden. Photos, small gifts, the business plan we'd written on a coffee shop napkin when Westline was just an idea. At the bottom was a simple silver chain with a pendant shaped like a compass. Aiden had given it to me when we launched the company. To remind you that no matter what happens, you always know your true north, he'd said. I fastened it around my neck, the familiar weight settling against my collarbone. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But for the first time in years, I felt certain of my direction, of what mattered, what I deserved, and what I was no longer willing to accept. The compass pendant caught the last light of evening, gleaming with quiet assurance. Aiden had always seen more clearly than most, had recognized the patterns in both code and human behavior that others missed. I wondered what he would say if he could see me now, finally standing firm in my own truth after years of accommodation and erasure. I thought I knew. He would smile that slightly crooked smile and say, "About time, Nat. I always knew you'd find your way." The morning of the settlement meeting dawned clear and bright, a rarity for early May in the Pacific Northwest. I stood at my apartment window, watching sunlight glint off the wet streets below. My hand instinctively went to the compass pendant at my throat, drawing strength from its familiar weight. Ms. Chen had texted me an hour earlier. Meeting moved to Prime Sync HQ in Seattle, 2 p.m. Tactical move on their part. I'm arranging transportation. I understood the strategy immediately. By relocating the meeting to their territory, my family was attempting to regain some psychological advantage. The 4-hour round trip would be draining. The unfamiliar setting would put me slightly off balance. And most importantly, the Prime Sync. Offices would be a visual reminder of what they had built, what they stood to lose if this confrontation escalated further. Let them have their small advantages, I thought. It wouldn't change the fundamental facts. At precisely 9:30, a sleek black car arrived outside my building. The driver, a professional woman in her 50s, greeted me with quiet efficiency. "Ms. Chen sent me. We'll be picking her up en route." The drive to Seattle passed in focused preparation. Ms. Chen and I reviewed our strategy, anticipated counterarguments, and discussed acceptable compromises. By the time we pulled up to Prime Sync's gleaming headquarters, I felt centered and prepared, not for combat, but for resolution. "Remember," Ms. Chen said as we rode the elevator to the top floor, They called this meeting. That means they want something from you. We're negotiating from strength, not weakness. The receptionist led us not to a conference room, but to a large corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. Vanessa's office, clearly, though she wasn't present yet. The space was meticulously designed to project success and innovation. Awards displayed on floating shelves, a massive digital display showing real-time data visualizations, modern furniture in PrimeSync's signature cobalt blue. My father's voice came from behind us. "Natalie, Ms. Chen, thank you for making the journey." He entered with Vanessa beside him and a distinguished older man I recognized as James Keller, one of Seattle's most prominent corporate attorneys. No sign of my mother. Ms. Chen and I remained standing as they entered, a small but deliberate choice that prevented them from controlling the initial dynamics of the meeting. My father gestured to the seating area, a circular arrangement of chairs around a glass coffee table. No power position, at least. "Please make yourselves comfortable. Can we offer you anything? Coffee? Water?" "We're fine, thank you," Ms. Chen replied. "Shall we get started? We have a considerable drive back to Portland." We all sat. I noticed Vanessa looked tired, with subtle, dark circles under her eyes that her makeup couldn't quite conceal. My father, on the other hand, appeared as composed as ever, though I detected a certain tightness around his mouth. "We've reviewed your demands," he began, the slight hesitation before the last word betraying his discomfort with being on the receiving end of demands rather than making them. "While we maintain that the trust actions were entirely legitimate and PrimeSync's technology is proprietary, we recognize that family harmony requires some compromise." Attorney Keller opened a leather portfolio and removed a document. "We've prepared a counter-proposal that we believe addresses your concerns while protecting PrimeSync's interests and market position." He handed copies to both Ms. Chen and me. I gave mine to Ms. Chen, preferring to maintain eye contact with my father and sister rather than immediately bury myself in legal language. "In essence," my father continued, "we're prepared to restructure your investment in PrimeSync as a formal, documented transaction, retroactively, of course, with preferential terms that would significantly increase your potential return when the company achieves its expected valuation." "That doesn't address the fundamental issue," I said quietly. "It wasn't an investment. It was taken without my knowledge or consent." Vanessa leaned forward. "Natalie, I understand you're upset about the process, but try to look at the bigger picture. Your money is helping build something extraordinary, something that will benefit countless businesses, create jobs, generate wealth. The return on this investment will far exceed what you would have realized from a simple real estate purchase." Again, it wasn't an investment. It was theft. My father's jaw tightened. "That's an inflammatory and inaccurate characterization. The family trust uses fraudulent amendments that I never signed," I interrupted. "Let's not rehash what we all already know." Ms. Chen, who had been scanning the counter-proposal, looked up. "This offer addresses only the financial aspect of our claims, and inadequately at that. It makes no mention of the intellectual property, issues, or acknowledgement of Westline's contributions." Keller cleared his throat. "Those aspects present more complex challenges. Public acknowledgement of prior art at this stage could create significant complications with investors and potentially impact the pending patent applications. Those complications should have been considered before appropriating someone else's." "Intellectual property," Ms. Chen replied smoothly. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. "We didn't appropriate anything. We built on general concepts, improved them, applied them in entirely new contexts." I reached into my portfolio and removed a specific set of technical comparisons, the ones showing Aiden's distinctive error handling methodology reproduced almost verbatim in PrimeSync's codebase. I slid them across the table toward her without comment. She glanced down, then quickly away, color rising in her cheeks. Isolated similarities in implementation don't constitute theft of an entire technology stack. No, but systematic replication of proprietary methods across multiple core systems does, I replied. Especially when combined with hiring away key personnel with intimate knowledge of those methods. A tense silence fell. My father broke it with an audible sigh. Perhaps we need to approach this differently. Natalie, what exactly do you want? If the concern is acknowledgement, perhaps we could find a way to recognize Westline's influence without compromising PrimeSync's market position. It was the first hint of genuine compromise I'd heard. I decided to meet it with equal sincerity. I want 3 things as we've stated from the beginning. Full return of my funds, proper acknowledgement of Westline's, of Aiden's, foundational contributions to what PrimeSync has built, and appropriate licensing for the continued use of that intellectual property. The funds are already deployed. In the company, my father objected. Extracting them at this point would create severe operational difficulties. That sounds like a problem that existed before you took my money without permission, not after. Keller interjected. What if we structured a buyout of your position over time? Initial partial payment, with the remainder coming from company. Revenues as certain milestones are reached? Ms. Chen and I exchanged glances. This was a potential opening, though not ideal. We'd need specifics, she replied. Timeframes, guaranteed minimums, security provisions. We can work those out, Keller agreed. But the intellectual property recognition presents more fundamental challenges. Public acknowledgement that PrimeSync's technology derives from Westline's work would undermine years of market positioning. Not if framed properly, I suggested. It could be presented as a deliberate, strategic incorporation of proven methodologies, enhanced and expanded by PrimeSync's innovations, a narrative of thoughtful evolution rather than wholesale invention. Vanessa looked startled by this suggestion. That's actually not terrible. We could position it as a conscious choice to build on established, successful approaches rather than reinventing unnecessarily. With proper attribution, I emphasized, including specific acknowledgement of Aiden's contributions. My father frowned. That level of specific attribution seems excessive. A general acknowledgement of Westline's prior work should suffice. Aiden's name needs to be part of the record, I said firmly. His work deserves recognition. Another silence fell as they absorbed my unwavering position on this point. I watched them exchange glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, my father nodded slightly. We could possibly accommodate a limited acknowledgement in technical documentation and patents, not in marketing materials or investor presentations. Technical documentation, patents, and the Our Story section of your website, I countered. Those are the minimum placements that would constitute meaningful recognition. Vanessa started to object, but my father raised a hand to stop her. That might be workable, with careful wording that we all agree upon. Ms. Chen made a note. And the licensing agreement for continued use of the intellectual property? That presupposes ownership that hasn't been established, Keller interjected. Without litigation and a court ruling, claims of ownership remain just that, claims. We have more than sufficient evidence to establish ownership in court, Ms. Chen replied calmly. But we all prefer to avoid that path, I believe. My father leaned forward, his expression serious. Natalie, let me be direct. A licensing agreement implies ongoing payments from PrimeSync to you personally. That arrangement would need to be disclosed to investors and could raise questions about the company's autonomy and financial obligations. It could significantly impact our valuation at a critical moment. I considered this. My goal wasn't to cripple PrimeSync or extract ongoing payments. It was to ensure proper recognition and restitution. What if instead of a traditional licensing agreement, we structured it as a one-time settlement for past and future use? A clean break that resolves all intellectual property claims permanently. Keller's eyebrows rose slightly. Clearly, he hadn't expected this flexibility from me. That could be workable. Combined with the acknowledgement provisions and the return of your initial capital, it would constitute a comprehensive resolution. For the next hour, we negotiated specifics: payment schedules, acknowledgement language, settlement amounts. The discussion was intense but surprisingly productive. With each point of agreement, I felt a weight lifting. Not because I was winning, but because truth was finally being acknowledged. During a brief break while Keller stepped out to consult with his associates, Vanessa approached me by the window. "I never intended to erase Aiden's contributions," she said quietly. "I admired his work, always did. The way he could see patterns that others missed, solutions where others saw only problems. Then why not acknowledge him from the beginning? Why build your company's narrative on the myth of wholly original innovation?" She looked out at the Seattle skyline, sunlight reflecting off the water beyond. Because the story of building on someone else's foundation doesn't attract the same investment or excitement as creating something revolutionary from nothing. Because I wanted. She paused. Wanted what? To be seen the way people saw you and Aiden, as creators, not just implementers, as visionaries. Her voice dropped even lower. You always had that, the ability to build something meaningful from the ground up. I wanted it too. The admission surprised me with its vulnerability. You could have partnered with me after Aiden died. We could have built on Westline's foundation together, openly, honestly. Instead, you chose this path. I know, and I've justified it to myself in 1,000 ways. That you were too deep in grief to continue the work, that the ideas would die if someone didn't carry them forward. That acknowledging the source would diminish what we were building. She shook her head. But seeing you these past weeks, how determined you are to honor Aiden's memory, his work. I understand better now what I took from you. Not just money, but legacy. Before I could respond, my father and Keller returned. The negotiations resumed, but something had shifted subtly. There was less defensiveness from their side, more genuine engagement with finding a resolution that acknowledged the truth while allowing PrimeSync to move forward. By late afternoon, we had the framework of an agreement. My initial investment would be returned in 3 payments over 18 months, with interest and a premium to reflect the opportunity cost. PrimeSync would acknowledge Westline's foundational contributions, with specific mention of Aiden West's innovative approaches to predictive inventory management. And a one-time settlement would resolve all intellectual property claims, allowing PrimeSync to continue using and building upon the technology without ongoing obligations. As Ms. Chen and their attorneys fine-tuned the legal language, my father pulled me aside. "This isn't how I envisioned this playing out," he admitted, his voice lower than usual. "I thought you would eventually see the wisdom of the investment, that you would appreciate being included in Vanessa's success story. Without my knowledge or consent, that's not inclusion, Dad. It's appropriation." He sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "I've spent my career making financial decisions for others. Perhaps I've lost sight of the line between guidance and control." It wasn't quite an apology, but from Richard Russo, it was as close as I'd ever heard. This isn't just about money or control. It's about respect. For my autonomy, for the work Aiden and I built together, for my right to determine my own path. The path you were choosing seemed diminished. A house? After what you and Aiden had created? It felt like you were shrinking your life rather than expanding it. That wasn't your determination to make. The house wasn't just a purchase, it was a foundation for the next chapter. A place where I could honor what we'd built while creating something new on my own terms. He was quiet for a moment, studying. me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You've changed these past few weeks. Become formidable. I haven't changed, Dad. I've just stopped accommodating, stopped accepting the role assigned to me without question. And what role is that, in your view? The supportive daughter, the responsible one who doesn't make waves, the one whose dreams and work can be repurposed to serve others' ambitions. I met his gaze steadily. I won't play that role anymore. He nodded slowly, something like reluctant respect in his expression. I'm beginning to understand that. Our conversation was interrupted as Ms. Chen approached with the finalized agreement. We're ready for signatures if you're satisfied with the terms. The signing itself was anticlimactic, a series of initials and signatures on multiple copies, exchanged and verified. No dramatic pronouncements, no emotional catharsis. Just the quiet turning of pages and the scratch of pens. When it was done, when the copies were distributed and handshakes exchanged, I felt an unexpected sense of hollowness. This resolution, necessary as it was, didn't undo the betrayal, didn't erase the knowledge that my own family had seen me as a resource to be used rather than a person to be respected. As we prepared to leave, Vanessa approached me one last time. What happens now? Between us, I mean. I considered her question carefully. I don't know. Trust, once broken, isn't easily rebuilt. But acknowledgement of truth is a necessary first step. And the next steps? Time, distance, demonstration that this agreement isn't just legal language, but a genuine change in how you see me and what Aiden and I built. She nodded, her expression solemn. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for the legal and financial complications, but for diminishing what you two created, for not seeing how important it was to preserve his legacy properly. Show that in actions, not just words. Make the acknowledgments meaningful. Honor the foundation you're building upon. That will mean more than any apology. The drive back to Portland was quieter than the journey north had been. Ms. Chen respected my need for reflection, focusing on her own work while I watched the landscape slide past, processing the day's events. You negotiated well, she said finally as we approached the city limits. Found the balance between standing firm on principles and being flexible on implementation. Not everyone manages that. I wasn't interested in punishment, just correction and acknowledgement. Even so, many in your position would have pushed for more punitive terms. The temptation for retribution can be strong in cases of betrayal. I touched the compass pendant at my throat. That wouldn't honor what Aiden and I built. We created Westline to solve problems, not create them. To build, not destroy. She smiled slightly. A rare perspective. And what will you build next, now that this is resolved? The question caught me by surprise. I'd been so focused on addressing the wrongs done that I hadn't fully considered what would come after. I'm not sure yet. Something of my own, I think. Something that builds on what came before without being defined by it. 3 days later, I received the first transfer, 1/3 of my original savings, plus the agreed-upon interest and premium. True to the settlement terms, PrimeSync's website had already been updated to include acknowledgement of Westline's foundational contributions, with specific mention of Aiden West's innovative approaches to inventory prediction. I sat at my kitchen island, staring at the bank notification on my phone. It felt surreal, a tangible confirmation that the resolution was real, that my stand had not been in vain. Yet the victory, necessary as it was, carried a certain weight of finality, a chapter truly closing. My phone rang. Marcus. Just checking in, he said when I answered. Heard through the grapevine that there was some kind of settlement. You, okay? I am. It's resolved, not perfectly, but adequately. Money being returned, proper acknowledgement given, intellectual property rights settled. That's, honestly, more than I expected them to concede. You must have built one hell of a case. We did. Thanks in large part to your help with the technical evidence. He was quiet for a moment. And how are you feeling about it all? About them? I considered the question carefully. Relieved that it's resolved. Sad that it was necessary. Still processing the knowledge that they saw me, my work, my money, my grief, as resources to be utilized rather than realities to be respected. Family patterns run deep, he observed. Breaking them isn't easy. No, it isn't, but necessary sometimes. I paused. How are things in Seattle? Any fallout from the settlement at Prime Sync? Quiet adjustments rather than dramatic changes. The acknowledgments are being incorporated without fanfare. Leo resigned yesterday, though, effective immediately. Word is he's heading to a startup in San Francisco. The news didn't surprise me. Leo had built his position at Prime Sync on the foundation of Westline's work. With that connection now publicly acknowledged, his role as innovative architect was compromised. Any other industry gossip I should know about? I asked, attempting to lighten the conversation. Marcus hesitated. Actually, yes. There's a rumor that Prime Sync is having cash flow issues despite the Series B funding. Something about unexpected development costs and a key investor backing out after the settlement announcement. That gave me pause. How serious? Serious enough that people are talking. Not crisis level yet, but concerning. The kind of situation that could spiral if not addressed quickly. After we hung up, I sat with this new information. The settlement had been designed to acknowledge truth and restore what was taken without crippling Prime Sync. I had no desire to see the company fail, not only because of the scheduled settlement payments still due to me, but because despite everything, it was still building on Aiden's work. Still bringing his ideas to a broader market, now with proper attribution. If Prime Sync failed, that legacy would once again be interrupted. I opened my laptop and began researching, pulling up financial news, industry blogs, LinkedIn updates from Prime Sync employees. Marcus's information appeared accurate. There were subtle but mounting signs of financial strain. Not a crisis yet, but heading in that direction. A text message interrupted my research. Vanessa. Can we talk? Not about the settlement. Something else. Important. I stared at the message for a long moment. My instinct was to maintain distance, to protect myself from further manipulation. But curiosity won out. If nothing else, I wanted to understand what was happening at the company now built partly on Aiden's legacy. I typed back, tomorrow, coffee shop on 5th, 10 a.m. Her reply came immediately, thank you, I'll be there. That night, sleep eluded me. I found myself sitting on my balcony at 3 a.m., staring at the city lights, turning possibilities over in my mind. If Prime Sync was indeed facing financial difficulties, what did that mean for the settlement? For Aiden's work now finally, properly acknowledged? For the future I was just beginning to envision for myself? The compass pendant lay cool against my skin, a reminder that even in uncertainty, I had found my true north. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same clarity and resolve that had brought me through the past difficult weeks. Dawn was breaking as I finally returned to bed, a plan forming in my mind. Not fully developed yet, but the outlines clear. Enough. If what I suspected was true, if what Vanessa wanted to discuss was what I thought it might be, then perhaps there was another chapter yet to be written in this story. Not one of retribution or even restoration, but of transformation. Of building something new and better on a foundation now properly acknowledged and honored. I slept for a few hours, dreams filled with code and contracts and conversations yet to happen. When I woke, I felt strangely energized despite the limited rest, ready to hear what Vanessa had to say. ready to consider possibilities I wouldn't have imagined just weeks earlier. The coffee shop was busy when I arrived, filled with the morning crowd of professionals and students. Vanessa was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She'd dressed simply, jeans and a sweater rather than her usual corporate attire, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked younger, more vulnerable than she had in the Prime Sync offices. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "What's going on, Vanessa?" I asked, accepting the coffee she pushed toward me but not drinking it yet. She took a deep breath. "Prime Sync is in trouble. Serious trouble." The settlement announcement triggered a cascade of due diligence requests from potential investors. Questions about our intellectual property claims, our development timeline, our burn rate. That doesn't sound unexpected given the circumstances. No, it doesn't. But the timing couldn't be worse. We're at a critical development juncture, with major milestones due next quarter and cash reserves dwindling faster than projected. I studied her carefully. "Why are you telling me this? The settlement payments are secured against Prime Sync's assets. Even if the company falters, my claim remains protected." "This isn't about the settlement." She met my gaze directly. "It's about the technology, about what Aiden started, what you continued, what we've built upon. If Prime Sync fails now, that work stalls again. Perhaps permanently this time. And? What are you asking of me exactly?" Vanessa's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "I'm asking for your help, your expertise, your understanding of the fundamental architecture that we've built upon. No one knows it better than you do." The request was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't formulate a response. "You want me to what? Consult? Advise? After everything that's happened? I'm asking you to consider a more substantial role, to help us navigate this crisis and stabilize the company, to ensure that the technology Aiden pioneered reaches its full potential in the market." I sat back, genuinely stunned by the proposal. Why would I do that? Why would I help the very people who took my money without permission and appropriated Aiden's work without acknowledgement? Because despite everything, you still care about what you and Aiden built. Because you fought so hard not just for restitution, but for recognition, for his contributions to be properly acknowledged. She leaned forward. "And because you're too intelligent not to see the opportunity here." "What opportunity?" A slight smile touched her lips. "To transform a crisis into something better than what existed before, to take a company built partly on deception and reshape it into something honest and genuinely innovative, to honor Aiden's legacy not just through acknowledgement, but through evolution of his ideas." The proposal was audacious, manipulative perhaps, and yet there was a certain logic to it, a certain potential I couldn't immediately dismiss. Even if I were interested, and I'm not saying I am, how would this work practically? You're the CEO. The company is your vision. A vision now in jeopardy without the right technical leadership and credibility with investors. She took a deep breath. "I'm proposing a restructuring. You would come in as Chief Technology Officer, with authority over all technical development and intellectual property matters, equal voting rights on the executive board, and equity compensation that would eventually make you a major shareholder." I almost laughed at the irony. "So after taking my money to fund your company, you're now offering me the chance to buy my way back in with my expertise?" "I'm offering you the chance to ensure that what you and Aiden built reaches its full potential. To transform something flawed into something better. And yes, to potentially profit significantly from that transformation." I sipped my coffee, using the moment to gather my thoughts. "And your role in this restructured company?" "I'd remain as CEO, focusing on what I do best: market strategy, investor relations, business development. You would lead the technical vision and implementation. We would be Partners, equals. Partners. I tested the word, finding it both alluring and concerning. After everything that's happened, you expect me to trust you as a partner? No, she admitted. I expect you to verify everything, to establish clear boundaries and accountability mechanisms, to proceed with caution and vigilance. She met my gaze directly. But I also hope that over time, through actions rather than words, something like trust might be rebuilt. I studied her, trying to discern her true motivations. Was this simply a desperate move to save a failing company? A manipulative attempt to use my skills while maintaining control? Or a genuine recognition that something fundamentally needed to change? I need time to think about this, I said finally. And I would need to see complete financial records, technical documentation, investor communications, everything, before even considering such a role. Of course. Full transparency is the only way this could possibly work. She hesitated. There's one more thing you should know. Dad doesn't know I'm talking to you about this. He wouldn't approve of the kind of restructuring I'm proposing. That didn't surprise me. Richard Russo had never been one to relinquish control voluntarily. And how do you plan to address that particular obstacle? A determined expression settled on her face. Leave Dad to me. This is my company, not his. And I'm finally ready to run it my way, not his. As I left the coffee shop an hour later, my mind was racing with possibilities. Vanessa's offer was unexpected, complex, fraught with potential pitfalls and opportunities. It would mean working closely with the very people who had betrayed my trust. It would mean stepping back into the technological space I'd partially retreated, from after Aiden's death and the sale of Westline. But it would also mean ensuring that Aiden's work continued to evolve and reach its potential. It would mean transforming something built partly on deception into something founded on transparency and genuine innovation. And it would mean reclaiming not just my money or recognition, but an active role in shaping the future of technology I had helped pioneer. The boardroom of Prime Sync Technologies fell silent as I finished my presentation. 8 faces stared back at me, some shocked, others calculating, a few nodding with reluctant understanding. I had just laid out a comprehensive restructuring plan that would either save the company or tear it apart, depending on whether pride or pragmatism won the day. This is completely unacceptable, my father finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. You're essentially proposing a hostile takeover disguised as a rescue plan. It's not a takeover, it's a realignment, I corrected, maintaining eye contact. PrimeSync's current trajectory is unsustainable. The cash burn rate exceeds projections by 42%. 3 major investors have paused their commitments pending further due diligence. And the technical milestones for next quarter are, by your own CTO's admission, unlikely to be met. Vanessa sat at the opposite end of the table, her expression carefully neutral. We had prepared for this moment over the past 2 weeks, reviewing financials, technical documentation, and investor communications. The picture that emerged was alarming, a company built on promises it couldn't fulfill without fundamental changes. The technology works, she said, addressing the board rather than our father. The foundation is solid, but we've overcommitted and under-resourced the development team. We've promised timeframes that aren't realistic, given the complexity of what we're building. And you believe Natalie is the solution? One of the board members, a venture capitalist who had led the Series A funding, looked skeptical. No offense, but your background is in much smaller-scale implementations. That's precisely why she's essential, Vanessa replied before I could speak. Natalie and her partner built the foundational architecture we've been expanding upon. She understands its capabilities and limitations in ways our current technical team doesn't. Ways I don't. My father scoffed. This is absurd. We don't need to bring in an outsider. We simply need to adjust expectations with investors and extend Our development timeline. That approach has already failed, I said quietly. 3 timeline extensions in 18 months, each one eroding credibility further. The issue isn't the timeline, it's the fundamental approach to building on the core technology. The board chair, an experienced tech executive named Diana Wong, had been silent throughout the exchange, her fingers steepled under her chin. Now she spoke. The proposal on the table is unorthodox, certainly, but so is the situation we find ourselves in. She turned to me. Ms. Russo, if the board were to approve this restructuring, what would be your first priorities as CTO? I was prepared for this question. First, a complete technical reassessment. Honest, unvarnished, shared transparently with the board and key investors. No more optimistic projections or vague timelines. Second, reorganization of the development team to align with this realistic assessment. Third, implementation of a staged development approach that delivers usable functionality in smaller increments rather than promising a full-featured system that remains perpetually 6 months away. And the acknowledgement of Westline's contributions? How would that be handled moving forward? It's already begun with the website updates and patent documentation. I would expand it to include proper attribution in all technical literature and investor materials. Not as a mea culpa, but as a strength, building transparently on proven foundations rather than claiming to reinvent from scratch. Diana nodded thoughtfully. And Ms. Russo, the other Ms. Russo, she clarified with a slight smile toward Vanessa. You support this approach? Even knowing it would significantly reduce your operational authority in the technical domain? Vanessa didn't hesitate. I do. Because I believe in what we're building, and I recognize that we need Natalie's expertise to build it properly. My skills are in market strategy and business development. Those remain vital, but they must be grounded in technical reality. My father stood abruptly. This is nothing but a power play. Natalie has orchestrated this entire crisis to force her way into the company after extracting a punitive settlement. That's not true, Vanessa said firmly. The settlement was justified. The technical challenges are real, and this proposal represents our best path forward. If I may, interjected another board member, a former tech founder himself, the company's current valuation is largely based on proprietary technology that, as we now know, builds substantively on Westline's architecture. Having one of Westline's founders join our leadership would strengthen our position with investors concerned about the recent disclosures. My father looked around the table, clearly sensing the shifting sentiment. You're all being manipulated. This is a family matter that has spilled inappropriately into a business context. With all due respect, Richard, Diana said, it became a business matter the moment PrimeSync built its technology on Westline's foundation without proper acknowledgement and used misappropriated funds for its Series B round. Her tone was matter of fact, not accusatory. The question before us isn't about family dynamics. It's about the future viability of this company. The discussion continued for another hour. Questions about technical specifics, governance structures, equity distribution, investor messaging. Throughout, I maintained a calm, factual approach. This wasn't about vindication or revenge. It was about transformation, taking something built partially on deception and reshaping it into something honest and truly innovative. Finally, Diana called for a vote. The proposal before the board is to restructure PrimeSync's executive leadership to include Natalie Russo as Chief Technology Officer with equal executive authority to the CEO in her domain, along with appropriate equity compensation and board representation. Do I have a motion? So moved, said the former tech founder. Second, added another board member. All in favor? 6 hands raised. My father and one of his longtime associates kept their hands firmly on the table. The motion carries, Diana announced. Mr. Russo, Ms. Russo, both Ms. Russos, please, work with legal to draft the necessary agreements. We'll reconvene next week to finalize the arrangement. As the board members filed out, my father remained seated, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. When only the three of us remained, he finally spoke. "You've won, Natalie. I hope you're satisfied." "This isn't about winning or losing," I replied. "It's about building something worthwhile on a foundation of truth rather than deception. Your sister built this company from nothing, and now you swoop in to claim control when it's finally gaining traction." Vanessa surprised me by responding before I could. "That's not what happened, Dad. I built this company on Natalie and Aiden's work without proper acknowledgement, used their innovations while claiming them as original. The fact that Natalie is willing to help fix what's broken rather than watch it collapse is something we should be grateful for, not resentful of." He stared at her as if seeing a stranger. "I don't recognize you anymore." "Maybe you're seeing me clearly for the first time," she said quietly, "seeing both of us clearly." He gathered his papers and left without another word, the door closing firmly behind him. Vanessa and I sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what had just transpired settling around us. Finally, she spoke. "That went about as expected." "Better, actually," I replied. "I thought he might throw something." She laughed, a short, surprised sound. "He hasn't done that since that investment bank turned down his pitch in '02. Her expression sobered. "He won't forgive this easily. Either of us." "Probably not. But that's not what this is about." She nodded, understanding. "So, partners?" She extended her hand across the table. I considered it for a moment, then reached out to shake it. "Partners. With clear boundaries, transparent communication, and regular verification of both. I wouldn't expect anything less." The weeks that followed were intense. 14-hour days of technical reviews, team reorganizations, investor meetings. I temporarily relocated to Seattle, taking a short-term apartment near PrimeSync's offices. The house in Portland would wait. This was more important. True to our agreement, Vanessa focused on stabilizing investor relations while I dove deep into the technical reality behind PrimeSync's ambitious claims. What I found was both concerning and promising, a sound foundation based largely on Westline's architecture, expanded in innovative but overreaching ways. The core concepts were viable, but the implementation plan was fundamentally flawed. I assembled the technical team for a brutally honest assessment. "We need to recalibrate expectations and approach," I told them. "No more promising comprehensive solutions that remain perpetually on the horizon. We're going to deliver functional components in staged releases, each one valuable on its own while building toward the larger vision." Some resisted, particularly those who had been instrumental in crafting the previous, more grandiose narrative. Others were visibly relieved to finally have permission to be realistic about what could be achieved and when. Leo's replacement, as lead architect, a brilliant developer named Mei Chen, pulled me aside after one particularly intense planning session. I've wanted to say this for months, but couldn't find the right channel. The approach we were taking wasn't working. It was like building a skyscraper without checking if the foundation could support it. "And now?" She smiled. "Now it feels like we're actually engineering rather than wishful thinking. It's refreshing." 1 month after joining PrimeSync, I presented our recalibrated roadmap to key investors. The meeting was held in the same conference room where I'd first seen Vanessa's misleading demo. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. "What we're showing you today is not a revolution but an evolution," I began. "A realistic assessment of where we are, where we're going, and how we'll get there." I gestured to the screen behind me, where a timeline displayed a series of incremental releases rather than a single transformative launch. Each of these milestones delivers tangible value. Together, they build toward the comprehensive system PrimeSync has always envisioned. I didn't shy away from the past. We've been guilty of overpromising, of presenting aspirational targets as imminent deliverables. That ends today. From now on, you'll get transparency, the good, the bad, and the occasionally ugly truth about this complex technological journey we're on together. I expected skepticism, perhaps even anger. Instead, I saw relief on many faces. They'd suspected the previous timelines were unrealistic. They'd worried about the gap between demo and deployment. Now they had clarity, even if the path forward was longer than originally presented. This approach may affect our valuation in the short term, I acknowledged. But it creates a sustainable foundation for genuine value creation in the long term. We're not building for the next funding round. We're building for lasting impact in the market. Vanessa stepped forward to address the business implications, seamlessly building on the technical reset I'd presented. We worked well together. Professionally, I had to admit. Her market vision complemented my technical pragmatism. When questions arose that crossed domains, we handed off to each other without territorial tensions. After the investors left, most cautiously supportive of the new direction, Vanessa and I debriefed in her office. "That went better than I expected," she said, removing her heels and curling up in her chair. The formal CEO persona had dropped away, revealing the more casual sister I remembered from childhood. I was prepared for at least one dramatic exit or threat to pull funding. People can handle difficult truths. What they can't handle is discovering they've been misled. I accepted the coffee she offered. "Have you spoken to Dad this week?" She shook her head. "Not since the board meeting. Mom says he's processing. Whatever that means coming from Eleanor Russo." "Processing or plotting?" A small smile. "Probably both." She hesitated. "Do you think he'll ever understand why we did this? Why it was necessary?" "I don't know. His entire worldview is built around control and appearance. This challenges both." I looked out at the Seattle skyline, afternoon light glinting off glass towers. But ultimately, that's his journey, not ours. And what is our journey exactly? Beyond saving Prime Sync? I considered the question. Building something honest, something that honors its foundations while creating genuine value. Something Aiden would be proud to see his work evolve into. She nodded slowly. "I'd like that. To build something we can both be proud of, without pretense or hidden agendas. It won't be easy. Trust takes time to rebuild." "I know, but we've made a start." 3 months later, Prime Sync released its first product under the new roadmap, a focused application that addressed a specific supply chain challenge rather than promising comprehensive transformation. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was real, functional, and immediately valuable to clients. The release materials included clear acknowledgement of Westline's foundational contributions and Aiden West's innovative approaches. Not as a reluctant admission, but as part of a coherent narrative about thoughtful technological evolution. I stood at the back of the room during the launch event, watching Vanessa present to clients and industry analysts. She was in her element, articulate, persuasive, genuinely excited about what we'd built. But unlike previous presentations, everything she claimed was demonstrably true. No smoke and mirrors, no promises of capabilities still months or years away. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Marcus, watching the live stream. Solid work. Aiden would approve." I touched the compass pendant at my throat, a habit that had become almost unconscious. Yes, I thought he would. Not just of the technology, but of the transformation it represented. From deception to transparency, from appropriation to acknowledgement, from conflict to collaboration. The house in Portland was still waiting. I'd delayed the purchase during the critical first months at Prime Sync, but hadn't abandoned the plan. It would be my anchor, a place of my own, separate from the company and the complicated family dynamics that surrounded it. A space where Aiden's memory could be honored while I continued to build my own path forward. As the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, Vanessa found me in the crowd. "Well, what did you think?" "Good work," I said sincerely. Especially the client testimonials. Having them speak to actual results rather than theoretical benefits made a difference. "That was your influence. Show, don't tell, right?" She smiled, the expression more genuine than the polished ones she reserved for public appearances. "We make a decent team against all odds." "We do," I agreed, "though we still have a long way to go. In rebuilding the company or rebuilding our relationship?" "Both." She nodded, accepting this reality without defensiveness. "One step at a time, then. For now, let's celebrate what we've accomplished so far." As we moved through the reception that followed, accepting congratulations and fielding questions, I felt a curious sense of completion, not of the journey itself, which was still unfolding, but of a circle that had begun with betrayal and now turned toward something like redemption. My family had taken what was mine, my money, Aiden's legacy, the truth of what we'd built together. But in reclaiming these things, I'd gained something unexpected, a new clarity about who I was and what I valued, a stronger voice that would not be silenced or diminished. And perhaps, in time, a relationship with my sister based on mutual respect rather than prescribed roles. I hadn't just bought back what was taken from me, I'd transformed it into something better, something true. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.